Okay. This feels much better. I feel much better about this. Welcome to my channel. That's really annoying to say. Willkommen aus mein... I don't actually speak that much German yet. But somebody had to say it. I'm coming to the internet because I had to say it. Lovecraft Country and The Boys on Amazon both utilize racial trauma in a way I think is irresponsible. Let's get into it.
There's too many parts, too many spaces, too many manifestations, too many lines, too many curves, too many ways, too many journeys, too many mountains, too many rivers, too many...
Lovecraft Country knows what it's doing when they make this spooky racial trauma, and The Boys kind of also knows what it's doing. It just cares less about its black audience. Spoilers for Lovecraft Country on HBO Max and season 2 of The Boys. I don't think I'll be spoiling much of season 1, but if you've seen season 1, you haven't seen season 2, like, don't watch this video. But if you've seen season 2, like, how haven't you seen season 1? Doesn't make any sense. So Lovecraft Country on HBO is about a man named Tick who has just come home from the Korean War and found out that there is magic in his family, in his blood, and he gets all of his friends and family roped in to his magic antics, basically. I mean, it's like, obviously it's not all his fault. It takes place in the 50s, and it definitely utilizes things that people were afraid of in the 50s and things that black people are still afraid of now. Also, it uses spooky supernatural elements, and it brings those all together, wraps them up in a bow as a horror sandwich specifically for black people. Which, I mean, there's an argument to be had that if black people have survived generations and generations of trauma, that they can also have a little treat of like safe trauma from the movies, because that's all that horror movies and horror TV shows have always ever been, is this like little bite of fear that you're kind of safe with, right? But I will say it doesn't make it any easier to walk around as a black person or like exist. Like, it just gives me an extra little ounce of the black paranoia. I'll get a little sus that I'm in danger because of some racists. And like adding a little spooky element on top of it doesn't make it easier, because I'd be afraid of ghosts too. Ghosts are scary too. There's like a lot of problems I think that people had with Lovecraft Country. Like, part of the thing is, when they were writing this, I would hope that this was written in 2018. I would hope that the scripts were finalized like in the early months of 2019 at the latest, because they were shooting this in the summer of 2019. So they didn't know kind of how turbulent of a summer, how eventful of a summer that we were going to have. And I think that there was a lot of people who were like coming out of this eventful summer and expecting something else. They were expecting the show to say something, first of all. I was expecting the show to say something, but I expect a lot of shows to say something, and a lot of stuff doesn't say anything. And they were, like, I think expecting for it to say something specific about black people in America. And it said, like, there were some lines sprinkled in here and there, for sure. I don't think it said as much as Watchmen did, but I think we were all a little let down by what it failed to say. We were let down by what it failed to say, what it left out. And personally, like, I was very disappointed in the queer representation, if you could even call it that. I mean, Ruby was literally in a lesbian relationship, but also a trans person was manipulating this. It was bad. Clearly there were no trans people in the room, if there were even any queer people at all. I was in a screenwriting class where we all had to come together and do a writer's room, and we were like, oh my god, we're gonna have these two gay characters, and at the end of the season, one of them is gonna get killed off. And we like hemmed and hawed for like days, going back and forth with each other, like, should we? should we kill this character? And it was like for an imaginary show for a class that nobody outside of us was going to read. Like the fact that we even went back and forth on it at all was something. But the fact that like of nobody in Lovecraft Country's writer's room even had a second thought about slicing the throat of a visibly trans character, like, oh my god, like y'all did, there were no objections for real? For real? Oh my god. Y'all. So that's like Misha, this is addressed specifically at you, Misha Green, writer, executive producer, showrunner, executive producer of Lovecraft Country, which I'm criticizing heavily right now. If you need a queer person, a queer black person specifically, I'm clearly free and available. I don't have anything to do. I can send you over some writing samples. And they take place in the 50s too. Anyway, lastly, the treatment of Ji-ah. Now, personally, like, I'm not an Asian woman, so I can't speak to this from any, like, place of relevance or experience, but I just thought that she was hypersexualized in a way that a lot of Asian women are. And it's really unfortunate because I know that Jamie Chung had expressed feeling like she had never been given a role this kind of juicy and meaty before, and she's afraid that she might not ever get one again because Hollywood. And it's just really unfortunate that that role still is tinged with these racial, with this gross racial trope, quite frankly. I mean, in the same way that Mantis is in Guardians of the Galaxy. But again, like, we can't, yeah. Anyway, if you're an Asian woman and you have a YouTube channel or you are thinking about starting a YouTube channel about movies, tell me how you felt. Tell me, start it, please, and tell us all how you felt about that because we want to know. I want to know. Anyway, now we're going to move on to The Boys, and then I'm going to compare the two. But if you're not aware of The Boys, it's a show on Amazon Prime about superheroes, but basically what would happen if superheroes really did exist in our real, corrupt, racist, sexist, misogynistic, homophobic, Islamophobic, xenophobic, keep going, any kind of phobic, like all of the problems of our day. They're like, let's make them, let's just enhance these people. The people who have like money power, like let's just pretend like they have physical power, which is like, I get that that's their whole shtick. Like, it's cool, it's funny. They toe the line between edgy and like too much, but at the same time, nobody wants to escape into their superhero show about how much it could be like real life. Like, it just feels like real life, and nobody wants that. It's gross. Quite frankly, it's depressing. It's really depressing. But the problem I had with season 2 of The Boys is like, clearly they wanted to get topical, and I don't read the comics, so like let me know in the comments if this was in the comics and it's like, oh yeah, they just adapted the next comic, you know? But clearly they were like, oh, you know, again, in the real world, there are Nazis and they're kind of back and everywhere. They kind of never went anywhere. And white supremacist thing, they're in the everything. Anybody in power, it's like, if you look hard enough, you can find a white supremacist or two. So The Boys was like, let's take that on. Superheroes? Yeah, I mean, Homelander already was a white supremacist. Like, it's in his name. And I find it funny because like in Marvel, they try really hard to like make Captain America anti-racist. Like they try really hard. But it's like, we all know in real life, if Steve existed in real life, he'd probably be racist. He'd probably be a Homelander type, you know? I mean, and again, like, we can do what we want with the comics, absolutely. And you can make people good people with the comics, absolutely. But like, power corrupts. And that's what The Boys is trying to bring attention to. And it's like, it's like he already was a white supremacist in season 1. This season 2 just brought it out, and they had Stormfront bring it out. And Stormfront basically, like, they want to introduce her, of course, as a superhero, and you're supposed to, like, I guess be suspicious, maybe? I mean, I find it funny that Homelander was suspicious of her at first, and I thought that Queen Maeve, like, I thought that they were going to have, like, a little love connection, because of that little side cut. I was like, that's really gay, but that was just my first impression, you know? But they had this little twist, and she's a white supremacist. Surprise! The white supremacists are everywhere. But she still gets this superhero treatment the same way that Homelander does. I mean, like, they love kind of glorifying the violence and the awful. I mean, they get these really intense and very disgusting sex scenes where it's like you're not supposed to enjoy it, but like people who would enjoy it, they get the time to. I mean, the one in the opening credits, like, it's almost too much where they're like in the alley and they just kill a guy, but they're kind of fucking while they do it. It's really disgusting. It'd be one thing if if they really didn't have enough time to enjoy it, but the guy like begs them to kill him. And that's enough time. If he has to say it more than once, anybody who really would have enjoyed that sort of thing, they had enough time to enjoy it. Absolutely. So like it brings this glorification to their characters, and there's this point about Stormfront that I wanted to make. This other one. Oh, there's actually a lot of points about. Uh, there's like the feminism moment, and it's like drawing attention to the Marvel, but it's not really making commentary. I remember the Stormfront moment. There's another moment where you see a guy get radicalized, and you like watch him like listening to Stormfront talk. He's listening to her more and more, and he's starting to get wary of the women in his class, and he's starting to get wary of the brown person who's the clerk at his local convenience store until it escalates. He thinks that the person at his convenience store is a soup,. And he kills him. Um, and we don't get a commentary about that. Like they show it, but it's like, okay, what do you have to say about it? What are you trying to tell us? Are you going to do anything to admonish those people? I mean, like, there are people who are definitely fans of the boys who recognize themselves in that guy spiraling for sure, but you need to take it somewhere where they're going to reflect on themselves, because there are people who are going to still take that at face value. And like she gets blown to bits, yeah, and then she's like speaking broken German, but that's like not nearly enough embarrassment for me. We don't see nearly enough fallout from Vought, the exposure of this. The final point that I'm going to make about the boys, and then I'll wrap this up, is this AOC character. This, what's her name? It's like Veronica or Victoria. She's like clearly AOC. Like, she's clearly supposed to be Alexandra Ocasio Cortez. They wouldn't have cast a Latinx millennial woman as a congressperson who like wants to take the people to task. Like, they wouldn't have cast that person if they didn't want us to immediately think it was AOC, of course. But what are you trying to say with that? If the ending bit of the story, the way that the season 2 caps off, is that we find out that the person who's been blowing everybody's heads up is this AOC congresswoman, right? And it's like, what are you trying to say? Like, it's one thing to have the people who are already in power, the white men, the cishet white men, the people who are in power in our universe, in our world, be the ones who are disgustingly abusing power because it's reflective of our real world. But then as soon as you take someone in real life who actually has a fine track record on trying to help people and be good and be a good civil servant as she's supposed to be, and then you take her and villainize her through this show, what are you trying to say? Like, I understand that you're trying to be wary of everybody, don't, it's the every side, it's coming from all sides, but the problem with that is you now have given as much basis to that hatred as Stormfront was already giving to hating these other people as a circle jerk, a bunch of straight white guys and a circle jerk who was like, do not have the critical thinking skills to back up and make sure that they're not actually going to create more of the problem that they were commenting on. Like, oh, it's commentary, but don't have anything to say. The Boys is irresponsible, and it uses the specific racial trauma of our country, of the United States, and applies it to these fake people, but then has nothing to say about the real one. I'd love to see where they go with it. I'm sure we're going to find out. in season three. And I'm sure maybe it'll be like, oh, I was doing it for the greater good. I'm gonna call it right now. The Boys season three, that Victoria character, she's gonna be like, I was blowing up all of these heads to make sure that, other white men can't keep blowing up other heads or whatever. And they know. They know. At this point, I'm really just tired, and I just wanted to make this comparison because once again, both writers know, but I think that the writers of the boys are like care a lot less. And I mean, it's the same argument that Mikey Newman had about Avengers, uh, Infinity War when Gamora was killed. It was irresponsible. It was irresponsible to say the least. And like irresponsible is almost letting them off the hook. Actually, like everybody needs to take film philosophy. Everybody needs to take a philosophy course and do some critical think. You guys, is there anything else? I don't know. I just think that this summer, like both shows came out around the same time. These were two probably the most talked about shows that came out during this like late summer, early fall period. So they were like the prestige television that everybody was talking about. And they both happen to be about racial trauma. I mean, ultimately, Lovecraft Country uses its racial trauma as like fun, spooky time. And The Boys uses its racial trauma as like fake commentary that doesn't actually say anything. So anyway, what do you guys think? Like, I want to know, especially from the Black people, especially from the POCs, and especially from the queer people, and anyone who's just relatively anti-Nazi. What did you guys think of both of these shows? Either of these shows? Did you notice that both of these shows, kind of, as a Black person, made you feel a little just like a little traumatized at the end? Like, did you feel that in a way that, white people wouldn't come away from those shows being the same way traumatized? Like, I think, I don't know, let me know in the comments. Like, subscribe, share, all that good stuff. And I'll see you next time, baby.